Hi. Welcome to another episode of Community Office Hours. As you know, I'm Tim, and it's Sam, my colleague. And we're going to take you through another week of updates on what's new on OpenRewrite and Moderne. And we'll go a bit more in depth in custom recipe development, as announced, looking at the visitor pattern and JavaTemplate. So, yeah. First, let's do a quick run of what's new in this week. First off, I think we did a new release just yesterday. So if you're using any kind of OpenRewrite versions locally, so either with the plugins or recipe modules, be sure to have a look there. Because we did a new release of everything, really. So as always, we recommend that you use the rewrite recipe bomb, which is a nice way to align the version numbers of all the various modules that come with OpenRewrite. And then in the release notes, we also say which versions are compatible of the plugins and OpenRewrite itself. So if you only go to this one page, OpenRewrite/rewrite recipe bomb, and then releases, you can find all the latest versions that we are currently recommending that you're on. And then, you can take it from there. And there's some good things in this release. We do a release roughly after 2 to 3 weeks, but there's a lot of changes that I've made it in. Some are small fixes, some are unlock new use cases, and altogether, it's just good to stay up to date. And it's always very fun to see all the community engagement. If you look through everyone who's contributed over the past couple of weeks, then it's a lot of it is even new contributors who've never contributed before, and it's just great to see. We've also been doing a lot of cleanup, so you'll see a lot of commits coming from my end. All of them applied through the Moderne Platform that we have, which is always fun to use your own tools on your own software. But some of the improvements we've seen over the past couple of releases is that we are now able to bump your Gradle dependencies if you've declared the version in your Gradle properties file. So that's great. So you don't have to do any changes in the recipes that you're using. And you now get that functionality added as well. And another change we've done specifically for the Maven folks is that we've had a community contributor make it easier to run things in parallel. And there's also been some efforts to standardize the arguments that you can pass in both on the command line and in your POM, such that we can deprecate some of the older options that we had, such that we just have one way to do things. And all of that is documented as well. If you go to the plugin documentation available in the top right corner, you'll see all the new arguments documented there. So that's pretty neat. So go update that. And that way, if you have any questions, we know that you're on the latest versions. So that really helps us as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And then apart from that, we've had some fun collaborations the past week. So you may have seen me pop up on the Quarkus Insights podcast, which was last Monday, I believe, or the week before, but it just came out. And then we've also had Jonathan appear on the Dev Product Engineering Lowdown podcast from Gradle, which is also great to see. So if you want to have some more content, then you can look at those two. And we'll be sharing these links as well at the end. And then we've also put out a blog detailing our own migration to the latest Spring Boot versions. So if you want to have a bit of a read-through of how we went about that, of course, updating some recipes and applying them through the platform that we have, which is just a nice detailed read of what we ran into and how you can now upgrade similarly to the latest versions. And next onto Java 21 and virtual threads and all the goodness that comes with being on the latest versions there. So that's a fun read. It's available at moderne.io/blog, and there you can read all about this. And again, we'll share that link as well. Now, as always, throughout this interaction, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and we'll do our best to pick them up as we go. And then Finally, maybe good to say that not only do we do these streams every week or so, we now also have a lot of small getting started videos. So if you ever want to know everything about a small subject in detail, you can watch all of these videos that have been coming out quite regularly, and we'll be putting out more as well. So it's really helpful to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can find any kind of content. The latest one here is on the distinction between OpenRewrite and Moderne, which is just a great, quick way to get that kind of information if you prefer the video form. So be sure to have a look there. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tim. So I thought we would talk a little bit about today about the visitor pattern, since it is so pertinent to being able to successfully write and run OpenRewrite recipes. And it is something that people have, like anything else, varying degrees of familiarity with. I know that before I worked on recipes, I had seen the visitor pattern before, but never been quite so intimate with it, perhaps, as we are on a regular basis writing OpenRewrite recipes, where you are often composing multiple visitors together or doing some of these other more fun techniques. So I thought I would share both some pertinent documentation we have on the subject and just discuss it somewhat generally. So I will share my screen. And we're going to do this one. So over here, let's see. Is my screen getting shared, Tim? Yeah, Tim, I've Jonathan and Tiffany are noticing the poppy audio. I was hearing that too. I'm not sure if it's a bandwidth issue or a microphone issue or what. We'll have to look into that. Look into that after.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for. Let's put a link to this in the chat. So an OpenRewrite recipe, which hopefully you guys are all super duper familiar with and have written lots of by now, but just in case you haven't. The meat of a recipe tends to be a visitor. And this is an example from our Rewrite Recipe Starter repository, where a Java visitor is used to visit method indications. Now, the kind of perhaps the reason that we're using a visitor pattern rather than just giving you the raw data structure to work with, which, I mean, actually you can totally get just the raw LST data structure and do whatever you want. Well, recipes always use visitors. Nothing stops you from interacting with an LST in some other way. But a visitor pattern is often really convenient for doing this access into an LST, because it is a really LSTs are complex data structures. They're a directed acyclic graph of all of the elements that together comprise a Java source file or some other source file. And since these data structures are recursive and deeply nested within each other, and any given recipe, you're typically not going to be interested in all of them. You're going to be interested in just a few. Yeah, yeah, Jonathan, can you imagine trying to manipulate the entire tree manually without the visitors? Good Lord. Yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah, I can imagine it, but I can't imagine actually finishing a program that did it. I could imagine starting a program that interacted with trees without a without the visitor pattern, but it would be it would just be a slog, particularly since we have our LSTs are immutable by default, and we use Lombox. Well, not always Lombox. We use Wither style methods to make changes. That is, to return a copy of an object with a single field changed. And particularly with that data access pattern, rather than your more typical mutating setter, manipulating a complex data structure without the aid of the visitor pattern is just hugely painful. So I've talked a bit about why
it's fun also.
Yeah.
If you look at the questions, we're sometimes getting Slack, We sometimes have folks who don't quite know the pattern as well. And they figured, well, I need to manipulate a statement within a method, within a class. And then they visit the class and start to do it that way. And it's just painful all around. And it's really, while we put out this content to really help folks through that, there is an easier way to do it.
Totally. Yeah. Sometimes it can be convenient when you're, mutating or making a change to, a list of statements or something like that, to visit to do it in the element that contains the list. And sometimes it can be convenient to do it while visiting the individual element. But, either way, tomato, tomato. So, in LST, this diagram here kind of shows a very simple program broken down into its Java LST. And at the top level, you've got your compilation unit, which is made of, a package, some imports, and some classes. And digging down into the class declaration, it is recursively defined and assembled out of an identifier, its name A, the block, which contains a list of statements. Those list of statements contain a variable declaration and a method declaration, and so on. And so for writing a program that processes not just this Java class specifically, but Java classes in general, you kind of need at any given one change you're going to make, like renaming a variable or adding a method, is going to apply to only a small subset of the LST elements, and all of the others that you're not interested in are kind of just noise, and your program would be full of logic to traverse through elements you aren't interested in to get to the ones you are and make the appropriate changes. And so that's kind of why we baked in the visitor pattern to this, because that's exactly what a visitor pattern does. It takes a complex data structure and it abstracts away the traversal component and presents that data structure to you as a series of events. Yeah, and I see a comment from Jonathan about trying to make it easy to enable only visiting the exact elements you want to change with the invocation matcher. Yeah, there's a number of ways you can refine what we've started with here, and you can once you understand the basics of the visitor, you can build on more stuff to further refine your searches or your investigations. So, with some. I had so if you have some tree, and you've got a root element, in the case of rewrite, this would be a class declaration or something, and it's made out of recursive sub elements, or it's recursively constructed out of sub elements. A visitor pattern, when I say abstracts away the traversal of this data structure, the visitor pattern is more or less going to define for you what order these elements are traversed in. In an OpenRewrite, we're always going to start with the root element, which is going to be a source file. Oh, it's much too hard to write text with the mouse. That's more legible than I expected. I was going to start with the root element, which is a source file, and then kind of traverse in source order. Now, obviously, well, yeah, kind of traverse in source order. Now, obviously, it's not inherent to the visitor pattern. Yeah, okay, so Jan has mentioned that with the text is not always super readable. Okay, I will make sure to zoom in. We'll make sure to zoom in any text we're looking at a bit more. So obviously, this ordering is kind of what we would typically do when traversing a tree, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can take control of the visiting to search things in different orders. And maybe one thing to kind of emphasize is that it's sort of a depth first in the way it goes. So, if there was another element off of 4, and these numbers I'm putting are kind of the order these elements would be visited in. We would go all the way down into the sub element before proceeding through the next sub element. And if you look inside of, the implementation of any one of these visit methods, so in here in Java visitor, the traversal of sub elements is built into these super.visit methods. So, this particular visitor overrides visit method invocation because method invocation events you can think of are all it's concerned with changing in this particular tree. But if you want to see how the traversal actually works, well, that happens in this super.visit method invocation call, which goes out to the rewrite Java. And there's a lot of stuff in here, but it all
Would
boils
you be able
down to and big in the text.
zoom a bit? There's also a presentation mode.
Oh yeah, what's the hotkey for presentation mode? Well, I guess it's probably
double shift, and then
that just reset. Oh yeah, I'll presentation mode. Oh, that's how to change presentation mode. Enter presentation mode.
Yep, that works.
There we go. That's much better. So if you ever look at one of these methods, this is from Java visitor, visit method declaration. What you see it doing is it going through the components of a j.method declaration, which is a prefix, the white space before the method declaration, the markers, which are optional metadata which can be attached, any annotations, its modifiers, its type parameters, its return type, further other places annotations can appear, its name, its argument list, its body if it's the kind of method that has one, and its type information. So like if you are writing a visitor and you don't call this, if we go back to if we were to, you don't call the super.visit method declaration, no traversal into sub elements will happen. And so that's kind of an important point about the usage of the visitor pattern, is that while you are using it, you still retain full control of how the traversal happens. So, this is the default implementation of visit method declaration, but, obviously within your own visitor, you were empowered to write your own. And having that power also means that you can mess it up. So that when you're writing a visitor, if you don't have traversal into sub elements in one of your overrides of one of these visit methods, you could unintentionally not make changes to things that you want to. Or if you're knowledgeable about how this traversal works, you can also see it as presenting opportunities for optimization, such as deliberately not visiting sub elements of things that are irrelevant to the change you're trying to make. And so it's a very common mistake for first-time recipe authors to forget to call the super.visit of the element they're visiting, and then post in the OpenRewrite Slack saying, why isn't the thing I'm interested in being visited? I've overridden the method, and in some containing element, they fail to visit that, or fail to call the associated super.visit. Let's see. Have you ever been bitten by that particular mistake, Tim? I mean, I know I have before. Particularly when I was first getting started, and even still occasionally.
Yeah, same here, and it's also fun. Like I do a lot of answering questions in the community, and every time you tell them, well, are you calling super.visit? And then they get the realization of that class they had 15 years ago, and
right.
Of course, yes, sure, I should have known. Yeah.
Yeah, so just to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about a little bit, let's actually break this recipe so it doesn't. If we go look at this recipe's unit test, we're doing fun things like replacing a guava method with its equivalent from the Java standard library. Yes. So we're doing things in here like replacing this guava method with its equivalent from the Java standard library. And currently, if I were to run the tests in this test class, we should see that they would all pass because I haven't broken the recipe yet. We'll give that a run. Yeah, and so those are all running. Cool. And so all of those pass. But now if I'll show you the most common form of this mistake as made by new recipe authors is to, say they also wanted to do something at the class declaration level. I don't know, maybe we want to rename the class something. We were going to say, return class decal with name, class decal get name. Say we want to rename this class from A to B and also do this replacement. And also do the replacement of the guava method with the standard library function. They might be like, okay, cool. Well, I want to change methods, so I'll do my method modifications, and I want to rename the class, so I'll do my class modification. And then, you go and give that a try, and what you see is that the renaming of the class happened, but the renaming of the method didn't happen. And so then you go over to the OpenRewrite Slack and ask Tim or myself, why doesn't my recipe work? And that's when we get into having this discussion. Because in this implementation of visit class declaration, we totally skipped the visiting of sub elements here. And so this is an example of how your recipe has full control over the traversal of the LST as you're applying a visitor to it. So obviously the easiest way to fix this mistake is to, you probably have seen this pattern of, and we'll call you. And you obviously are complaining that I'm doing an early return. You'll see this kind of thing a lot, where the first statement is the call to super, and then we make any other edits that are requested we make any other edits after the traversal into sub elements. And so, now if I run this test, now that I've put the traversal back in, we should see both the, test gets renamed to B, as well as the recipe makes its other changes. Yeah, and so the test passed. And so, this is the most common pattern, but when I say that you have full control over the traversal, you really have full control over the traversal. One other thing you might do is say, I don't even want to continue with the current visitor I'm in. I want to apply some totally different visitor to this subtree. And that's something of a more advanced recipe authoring technique would be to have, your recipe can define multiple different visitor classes. So if we wanted to, we could separate these things out into, a separate into multiple different visitors. For example, if we wanted to have a like a single responsibility thing going on, where you've got one visitor for renaming the class to B and one visitor for replacing the method invocation, you could totally do that and have multiple visitors just right there. Whoa, I'll zoom this back in, and so we could say, oh my God, why is it bouncing? Oh, it's because of the GitHub. Because I'm so zoomed in that the suggestions that Copilot is making about what code to write are taking bouncing around the editor. Let's see. So, that's very hard to watch happen. Let's see. Oh no, that typing this zoomed in is not going to work. Let's see. If I enter presentation mode again, maybe that will help. All right. Am I still going to get? We'll make a separate class for, presentation mode helps with this. So we make a separate class for, we'll call this replace method you will be of execution context. And so we'll just copy, we'll just take, I'm just going to take this visitor and stuff it down here. And I made this an ISO visitor, which means that, which just includes casting. Oh wait, this can't be an ISO visitor because we're going to replace the methods. This has to be a regular visitor. Yeah, very good. So we're going to leave the class declaration part out of this. And now we're going to remove all of this stuff. And so now all we have is the removal, and I have messed up the curly braces. There we go. So now this visitor only does the renaming of the class declaration. So I don't know, we could, so one option would be to, if we want to separate these things out, is to do the class declaration and then separately apply this replace method visitor, which we can do inline. So like if we're just renaming like the top level class and we're not worried about inner classes and such, we could say, hey, for performance or potentially even correctness reasons, you will we will not do this traversal into sub elements. And let's say, yeah. And so Jonathan Light shows this question about ISO versus non-ISO. It's purely a convenience thing. So Java, if I switch this back to Java ISO visitor, and I go look at, well, you see here that this is saying, hey, Java ISO visitor declares visit method invocation to return another method invocation. And in this particular case of this, where we're swapping out a method invocation for a constructor invocation, those are different types of LST element, even if they're very similar. And so ISO visitor just defines visit method invocation to be a call of the regular Java visitor visit method invocation plus a cast. So it's a convenience thing that saves you having to litter your code with casts when you're not changing the LST type of the elements you're visiting. Like if you're only changing their components, but not ever doing the swap of a method invocation for a constructor invocation or anything like that, then you don't need to. Then you don't need the flexibility of the broader. And so this guy, these templates, this would, if I actually run this, this is going to cause a class cast exception because these templates are going to return, j.newClass, and I'm going to return it as a j.method invocation, and the JVM will understandably be angry at me for lying about it. So you can always just use Java Visitor and ignore the ISO versions of the classes, but you'll just have a few more casts in your code if you do that. Okay, right. So back to what I was saying about the traversal aspect. Maybe I'll just call you. I'll call this class declaration still, and I'll say j.class cd equals with. I'll just move this up here, and we're going to return cd. Okay, so I might say, hey, this visitor is done. It has no further need to traverse into sub elements, but I still want my replace method visitor to do something. So I could say cd equals new replace method dot visit. I usually call this ctx. I'll use the visit non-null version. Now, the one other thing that you might want to consider here is that you should pass through the cursor too. So let's go back over to the test. And now that we have refactored the visitor, or that we've refactored this to separate the renaming of the class from the changing of the method. Thought that would work. Now that's interesting. So we did
It's
get the
a new
change made.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, but it still has the import. I
The
wonder
import.
why. Yeah. So that's interesting. I actually wasn't expecting that to happen. So it seems like when doing it this way, that the maybe remove import, maybe add import didn't trigger quite right. So that's something for me to consider. Yeah. So you could, but you see how we still got most of the changes from applying the visitor that way. So you can do this kind of thing to separate out implementation of different traversals or different edits into their own visitor. So sometimes if you have a complex refactoring operation, you might want to have one visitor responsible for one thing and another visitor responsible for another thing. And very occasionally you might want to take direct control, not traverse every sub element, but only some of them, in which case instead of calling super.visit like these do, you could provide some alternative implementation which visits only the items you're interested in. Yeah. So I will go ahead and revert these changes for now. And yeah. Yeah, so I feel like I've kind of rambled at you for a little while um, about visitors. Are there any questions about anything we have talked about so far? I mean, I know Jonathan Lightshoe, you've written enough that this is probably not new stuff for you, but any other questions about this? Yeah, cool. So one other fun thing that you kind of an advanced, I don't know if this is an advanced feature. Another feature, let's say, that can be useful, but is not maybe obvious from either the visitor pattern or to new recipe authors in general, is how to use cursor messaging. Actually, how are we doing on time? How much time do we have left?
So it's now 9:30. We started at 9, so we could do another half hour or whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, let's see. I'm just trying to decide if we should end it here and cover more topics in the next meeting or do more now. What do you think, Tim?
Good question. I think we have a lot of content coming up still.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we'll end the discussion of visitor stuff for now, and I can talk about cursor messaging and some other advanced features next time. Or if you have questions about those things, you can always ask us in the community Slack.
Yeah, sure. And just I put the link to the starter, the project that you saw Sam go through, at the bottom, so you can follow along there and yeah, try to do the same. I've added some comments to that just this morning, such that you now also get to see some of the debugging hints that we have in there. So if you want to print the LST or you want to print the recipe hierarchy, all of that is now in there. So it should be more welcoming to beginners. So go have a look and try things out.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, and yeah, like you say, Jonathan, cursor messaging can be used to complicate things, but it's a powerful technique that can occasionally make some things that would otherwise be difficult really easy. So we'll look forward to talking about that next time.
Yeah, cheers.
All right. Thanks a lot for coming, everyone.
Is there anything?
Any further questions?
Is there anything?
Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
No, I was asking if there's anything you want to cover, or otherwise I can share a bit more on what's coming up next couple of weeks.
Yeah, go for it.
So our colleague Peter Streef He's going to present at DevWorld conference in Amsterdam. So that's pretty neat. That's coming up at the end of this month. So you are able to see him there. And then looking slightly further ahead, we're also going to be at DevNexus with both a presentation and a workshop. So if you're at either of those, go look us up. We'll be there as well. And then, apart from that, if you want to have some extra reading material, we also have a book on automating code remediation, which you can scan and get sorted that way. And I'll share this link in the comments as well. And then also, if you want to have a look at the platform that we've built, which I told you helped us migrate to Spring Boot 3.2, then there's a link here where you can try that out as well. So, yeah, cheers.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. See you next time.
Yeah, cheers. See you soon.